To our CONECTAA talk, association events, what's hot and what's not. I'm happy to welcome with us today Antonio Guadagnoli, Director of Global Operations, Congress Management, PCO at MCI Group. Welcome, Antonio.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you. Antonio, for our talk today, in your position and overseeing a lot of the operations, not only in Europe, but also on global level, 21 months into the pandemic, what have you seen as trends in events for associations, both in Europe and on global level?
No, that's an interesting question. First of all, because 21 months is very long, right? It's kind of significant period of time, but especially because we've seen many evolution in the 21 months, right? It's kind of a topic that I often take back with some of the team members and say, well, just remember that in April 2020, the mindset was a bit different in the sense that we were all expecting to die in the coming 2 months. And since then, what has been achieved, and it's not in 21 months, but more in 16 or 17 months, has been a total transformation of our industry. Our whole industry, including associations, including venues, technological providers, PCOs, AM&C companies, the whole industry has been reshuffling and transforming in 18 months, changing the world of events like never before, and to somewhere that it will never be the same again. So saying that, it's kind of saying everything but nothing at the same time. Saying that, we've seen different timings in these 18 months. So the first reaction has been to panic a little bit, with events around the corner, and potentially having events to deliver within 2-3 months, or even 2-3 weeks after the closure of everything. And then there's been some sort of a emergency conversion with some mistakes that have been done. We've been learning from that. Since then, we've been learning that copy pasting from the face-to-face into the virtual with no adaptation doesn't work. And some of the trends that we've seen developing since then are around this adaptation, are around conversion, adaptation to the format, but also consumption. So kind of disclosing a little bit of the secret sauce, we've started to understand that adapting to the virtual world is already something that is a significant task, that is requiring us to change some of the things we've been doing in the exact same way for many, many, many years. So I think that, first of all, the pandemic on one side was a huge wake-up call for the planet with regards to the risk that viruses and other infections similar to that could be on a global basis. But it's also been a wake-up call for our industry, in the sense that it's been shaking us and forcing us to make changes that, as an industry, again, we were collectively not really ready to take. Right? We kind of, the whole discussion about virtualization is connected to the whole discussion about digitization of events. And from my personal experience, that's a 15 years old conversation. It didn't start yesterday. It didn't even start the year before. It is something that started 10, 15 years ago, when we started to talk about recording content, making it available to watch after the event, and so on. So I think that it's been forcing us to make those changes. And that is one of the first trends that we can talk about, is that many associations, not all of them, but many associations that were reluctant to make that change have made the decision, whether they wanted to make that decision or were forced to make that decision, to go virtual. Surprisingly, from my perspective, there are associations that have chosen not to run events in the virtual space, at least on year one. So of course, I was mentioning the fact that, we've been going through different period of time. On year one, there are associations that have jumped on the virtual. There are associations that have taken their time and then went virtual. And there are associations that simply refuse to go virtual because they defined that it would not meet their raison d'être, their what they wanted to achieve as their core values in their product portfolio or in their objectives. So they simply refuse to do that. And then there's the second year that comes, where suddenly, the questions that you were asking yourself in thinking that the pandemic would last less than a year and would affect only one of your yearly congresses or yearly event, now you started to think in a different way. because on year 2, it's not to say that it's going to last forever, but you're starting to get some hints that maybe it's not going to be limited to affecting only one of my events, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. And that's where we start to talk about hybridation. That's where we start to talk about the fact that, and that's again another trend that I've seen very surprising to me. We start to talk about hybridation mainly because on one side, the COVID-related measures are getting softer in some areas of the world, and much worse in others, but they're getting softer in some areas of the world. But also, we've seen a digital fatigue arising at a speed that was by far unexpected. I mean, personally, I would have expected to be tired of virtual after maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years, of going very much virtual. Then I would have gone, yeah, okay, now it's been 2 years. Now I would like to get back to face. And in reality, it took just a few months. And it is very surprising as a trend, and that's a general trend, that while it was announced as being, very disruptive and potentially, killing the world of congresses and events, in reality, the virtualization of event showed that there was a space for everybody, that there's a space for virtual, but there's clearly a space for face-to-face, and most of the associations and the participants and the industry are very, very, very eager to go back to face-to-face. And that is really across, I would say, not across the planet, but across the various markets I've been able to work in.
And what would you say is really hot today? So building on these trends, what do you say is really hot in association events?
So there's many things in the sense that, as I was saying, we've been reinventing a lot of things. So some of it we reinvented, some of it we rethought, some of it we discovered. But I think that for me, what is most probably one of the most hot things today is not forget the lessons learned. So basically, we've been learning a lot of things. We've been learning, and maybe we can go back to that later, but we've been learning many, many, many things during the first transition, and let's call it transition from face-to-face to fully virtual. And now we're learning a number of things between, with the second transition from virtual to hybrid. And we learned a lot around, content, consumption, sitting behind the screen, consumption habits, and how to address different audiences and so on. And I think that, we've been learning, and we always have a tendency to go back to a comfort zone. And sometimes the comfort zone has been moving. So I think the first hot topic in our industry, and especially with associations and PCOs, is that we need to understand that our targets and our comfort zone has been moving. So in reality, that is translating the fact that if we're trying to go back to where we were before, we will find an empty room. So that's the first thing. The second thing that is really hot today is virtualization. It's kind of always there's kind of that background question. Is virtual here to stay? Is virtual here to replace face-to-face events? Is virtual here as a common accepted practice, or is it something that is out there because we had no other choice? Well, the answer is, from my perspective, right? The answer is, first of all, I think virtual is here to stay, because it's been demonstrating so many positive things on one side that we kind of clearly understand that there may be huge benefits in keeping that virtual portion. So that's the first hot topic. The second hot topic is that we've also, in a very short time, be able to understand that we could not really afford missing the face-to-face portion, right? So that's very hot in terms of understanding, in the sense that it's the kind of hybrid format is almost imposing itself for the future. What is interesting to note, in that conversion to virtual, is that we've been seeing associations fully embracing that change because they believed in it. But it's also a vast portion of our customers have been embracing that change because they had no other choice. Because they needed to run the event, because the event was around the corner, because they needed the funds generated by the event to keep on surviving in difficult times, and they had no other choice than going there. So the difficulty was that, it's like running, like running after something in which you believe, or after something in which you do not believe. So which is changing a little bit the landscape. Now, yeah, go ahead.
Please finish.
Yeah,
to hybrid, because you how does that tie into then? And do you see that really as the future?
Well, I think that the hybridation of meetings is really something that will last, right? I think the difficulty around the hybridation of the meetings is that on one side we don't really have a choice, in the sense that, when as I said before, if we were to go back to where we were before, we'll find an empty room, because there's so many things that have changed. And if you kind of think about it, you have changed, I have changed. The way we live, the way we work, the way we consume content, the way we participate to online meeting, the way we're delivering this interview. In the past, we would have done it differently. We would have met, we would have gone to a room, and we would have had multiple takes and do this in this way or that way, but in a different way anyway. So I think what is difficult is that we kind of get to the understanding that it's going to be difficult to go back to where we were, so we need a change, or we need to keep the change, and maybe we need to push the change further. So that's one side of it. The second side of it is that we understand that fully virtual is difficult in the long run, as in a sustainable format, for financial reasons on one side for associations, right? Because it's usually, it might be challenging on that side. But we also understand that pure face-to-face will be challenging in the future for many reasons around sustainability, but also around finance and around people's availability, and also the way people consume content will make it that at a point in time, it will become almost like running water in hotels, or electricity in hotels. If you're not proposing a hybrid event, you're missing a portion. You're gonna be abandoning a portion of your audience. So yes, definitely, hybrid is hot today, and what will make it, I would say, a challenge is that it's happening in different ways. So the conversion of hybrid, we had those conversations very early on, to be honest, is that we started to think about, now we've been moving to virtual, now we're going to move to hybrid. And so how's the move to a hybrid be happening? And we thought that it would happen in a certain way that was kind of almost similar to virtual, which is just in one go. Because basically, when we converted from face-to-face to virtual, there was no other way than going full virtual. You couldn't really, say, well, we're going to keep a portion, and that's going to be face-to-face, and then there was no choice. Now, when going from virtual to hybrid, there are multiple choices on how you're making it happen, right? You can, and in reality, we thought the market would adapt faster. So the market it's not getting slow, but you kind of still feel the resistance to change, in the sense that people are going to hybrid, but it's not that easy and natural as we would have expected it to be, with the understanding that we've been making virtual part of our everyday life very quickly, very, very quickly. So we thought the adaptation to hybrid would be faster. I have to say that in that, the always changing COVID regulations are not making it easier to handle, in the sense that it's always difficult to plan for a face-to-face portion where you have little indications on whether you're going to be able to deliver it or not. But I think, that's what defines hybrid as pretty a hot topic today.
And if we speak about the challenges and the failures, I imagine with all the events that MCI has done over the last 1.5 years or even more, there's quite some insights that you can share with us. So what is not hot, and maybe also if you could include regarding the hybrid, I think many organizations would like to go there, but still feel it's costly, and maybe because of that prohibitive. So if you could take that into one of the challenges as well.
Sure. So you're right. Let's go back to hybrid and talk about money. One of the difficulties of hybrid is, so one of the beauties of hybrid is that it is in building some sort of a safety net for the event, so especially in COVID times, because as you're building at the same time the face-to-face and the virtual, you can use the cursor, you kind of, you go full steam virtual or full steam face-to-face anywhere you were working on the two items. So that is one of the nice things of hybrid beyond the fact that you can reach much wider audiences. And when we talk about audiences, we're also talking about industries. Some industries are very interested in participating in a virtual format more than in a face-to-face. But in terms of challenges, clearly, there's first of all, there's the cost. Because basically when you go hybrid, you are more or less, in a nutshell, taking a face-to-face event cost and then you add the technology, right? And that's going to last for a while, in the sense that it's still going to take some time for the technology to become cheaper again, so that it can be some sort of melted in the original face-to-face budget. So in the meanwhile, what we need to be able to achieve is that if we're adding virtual components cost on one side, we need to be able to attract virtual participation money on the other side through virtual sponsorship, but also through the paying participation of virtual participants. So that is one of the challenges. It is around finance. Another one is clearly around data, because when you go hybrid, one of the difficulties is that on the virtual side you can collect perfect data. So you can collect every click of a button, everything that participants are doing and viewing. We need to be able in the very near future to match that on the face-to-face component of the meeting, so that we can produce, data that is enabling organizations to make data-driven decisions. And we can't afford to make data-driven decisions if on one side we're collecting 100% correct data and on the other side maybe 25% correct data. So I think those are the challenges, and these challenges have been leading, as an example, to some, I would say, failures, but also misunderstandings, right? And I think that part of that very fast transition when we went from face-to-face to virtual was that we had many clients that when they thought they're going to go virtual, they immediately thought about, okay, which platform we're going to get, and in reality, in that process, when you kind of, now after having some iterations and also put some strategic thinking into it, we kind of understand that the platform is in reality, the technology is just a technology. A tool is a tool. If you've not revised your objectives, the way you're going to implement your business models, your registration fees, the format of the program, XYZ, so basically, if you've not redone your project planning for your virtual event, and you're simply keeping everything as it was, but you're picking a platform, well, you're missing the point in reality, And as I very often make that comparison, is that if you were coming to me and asking me, okay, Antonio, I want to go, find me a restaurant, and I would go, okay, which country, which city, how many people, what budget, what kind of food, what kind of specific requirements, which distance from where you are, and then having answered all these questions, I'll be able to point you to 2 or 3 different restaurants. But guess if I had pointed you to one restaurant without knowing all that? Well, there's 99.5% of chances that I would have missed my target, right? So that's also one of the learnings, is that many of our customers have been jumping on AV suppliers as they thought they were holding the answer, the truth, and in reality forgot that a virtual event is nothing else than an event that is happening in a venue that is called virtual space. There's no other, it's nothing different. So it's those were some of the learnings we've seen, and the platforms, it's not firing, not shooting at platforms, but the reality is that platforms have been the fastest moving business in the past 18 months in our scope, in our space. And as an example, we already mentioned that in the past, is that if you look at Teams, so the tool that is used by so many people to have virtual meetings, well, it's been having at least 80 updates in the last 18 months. So that platform that was about to be abandoned by Microsoft has been turned into one of the main virtual meeting platform in just 18 months. And that has happened across the board to most of the technology providers. Many of them, if not all of them, were having a decent product that was sized for a tiny market, and it suddenly has been becoming huge. The last example is Cvent. For those of you that know Cvent as an example, Cvent about 2 years ago was some sort of a nice evolving platform that was working on specific areas of event, and it just started its quotation at NASDAQ 2 days ago. So that's what's been happening to Cvent in less than 18 months, from a kind of almost confidential technology provider, although successful, but kind of confidential, to a company that is quoted at NASDAQ. So it's that's the kind of things we've been seeing in the evolution of the platforms.
Thank you, Antonio, for your time and for all the useful insights. It was great hearing you.